Welcome back to my workshop. In this video, I'm going to be making a light-up tree sculpture as a present for my grandfather. One of the things I do need for this project is magnet wire. Now, I have run out of magnet wire, and you can't buy any in stores nearby, and I would be unable to order any soon enough. However, I do have this old electric motor, which I've got a bunch of electric motors. I don't particularly need this one. And electric motor windings are made of magnet wire. So let's take this apart. So there we go, a bunch of magnet wire. A lot of it ended up damaged by the process of getting it up, and so I only got pieces that were like a foot or so long, which wouldn't have worked if I were using this to make, you know, something that magnet wire is normally used for, like an electric magnet or a motor or something like that. But in this case, since I'm wiring up individual LEDs with it, these strands will be perfectly usable. And one of the 3 poles I was able to completely unspool, and I just rolled it up on this spool of electrical tape for now. If I run out of that, I do have an extra motor that I can disassemble to get more. So to make sure that these are all working before I assemble them in the final project, I'm testing them on this homemade power supply that I made out of old, well, it was an old PC power supply when I made this 10 years ago, so now it's ancient. And it sounds like an engine, but it still runs. I'm putting hot glue on these for 2 reasons. One of them is to strengthen the very thin magnet wire where it connects. And the other is to prevent any of the solder joints from being uninsulated and able to touch other branches if things move around. After making all those, I only had 2 of them fail testing. This one, I'm not entirely sure what's wrong with it. I don't see anything obviously wrong, so it's probably just a bad solder joint, or maybe the magnet wire is cracked somewhere. This one, I somehow managed to solder both sides of the circuit to the same lead of the LED. Not sure how I got confused and did that, but oh well. All the rest of them came out fine. That's the final coat of polyurethane done. Just need to wait for that to dry. The first one I didn't have the camera rolling for, apparently. Anyway, it's now about 3 a.m. This is why you don't embark on projects at the last minute. This turned out well enough that I was asked to make another one. For this one, I've got a bit more time to capture better video of the process. I'll also be making a few changes to the design, including mounting the battery pack that it runs off of in the base, and using proper magnet wire instead of what I was able to salvage from motors. I'm using this little USB power bank to supply the power to run the LEDs on the tree, and it's got these little charge status indicator lights, and I would like those to be visible through the base of the tree. So it's going to sit in this pocket that I've milled, and so what I want to do is I want to drill 4 little holes. There's 4 lights here, but only 3 of them are lit up because it's not fully charged. I want to drill 4 little holes in the base of this pocket that will line up with these LEDs. The thing with that is that these are very small and it's hard to get them to line up, and because of course they're on the underside of this when I place it in here, I can't transfer them directly. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to trace this on a piece of paper and then put it behind the tracing, and when I light it up, the lights shine through the paper and I can mark where those are. Then I can put the paper in the slot that I cut, and I can punch the holes, and that'll give me my positions to drill. this up as best as possible. Of course, since the sides are curved, it's hard to get exactly, but that should be good enough. I think so. Let's move on. A clamp can hold the paper in place better than I can. I'll stay put while I mark these out. So we've got our 3 marks. Of course, there are 4 holes, and since it's not fully charged, the 4th one isn't lighting up, and I don't want to wait around for that to charge up. So what I'm going to do instead is just measure the distance between those existing holes, and then draw a 4th hole at the appropriate spacing. They don't align super well to either metric or imperial, so that's fun, but I think they're closer to being 3.5 millimeters apart. Okay, so there's our template with the 4 holes. Now I can put it in here and mark out our points. So now let's give that a test. We have the holes drilled, and if we turn on the lights, put this in here, we can see that that lines up nicely, and we can see we've got 3 out of 4 charged. Now, of course, if it's not perfectly lined up, you can't see the lights. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tiny bit of maybe hot glue or epoxy or something at the top of these holes to diffuse the light a little bit so that you can see it from other angles besides straight down. So I'm not actually too sure what is the best filler material to provide a little translucent coating at the end. So I put a few holes in the end of a paint stirrer and then put a few different glues I had on them. So I'll let these dry and then see which of them works best. I've got hot glue, epoxy, super glue, and wood glue, which the wood glue is opaque right now, but it dries sort of a transparent brown color. So I'll check back when these are dry. Okay, so these glues have all dried, and looking straight through them, lining up the holes, the light comes through when it's pointed directly. But the real question is how it comes through when they're pointed off angle. The super glue seems to have the surface tension pulled it back into the wood, so it didn't actually fill that, so we can rule that out straight away. Come on, line up. So hot glue is not super visible at off angles. That's okay. Epoxy is better. The super glue obviously didn't create the fillet, and the wood glue, it's visible but very dim, and I'm not sure that I like the amber tint, so I think the epoxy is the best choice here. I was thinking of putting an epoxy coating on this piece anyway, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of the hardware store epoxy, the thick stuff that I used for this test, in these holes, and then I'm going to sand that smooth and then coat it with the thinner coating of resin. It doesn't matter that we're putting extra epoxy over this, because in my experience, epoxy sands pretty well. And now we can see the charge status in those drilled holes. So I coated this in epoxy, partly to give it a better surface, but also because it's a slab of birch bark, or it's a slab of birch, and birch bark itself is very flaky and prone to coming off easily, so this is just a way to stabilize that bark. The wood is very porous, especially because this is all end grain, so I ended up having to come in several times to put down a new layer of epoxy while it was still drying, because it kept soaking into the wood. And you can see there's still a few spots here where it did soak down, and in fact it soaked all the way through to the bottom in some places, but that's fine because this isn't a visible surface on the final part. I think that came out pretty nice. I try to stop it just before you get to the bottom, because with these brad point drill bits, what you can do is the moment that the bottom point pokes through, you can flip the part over and center on that point, and then drill from the other side, and that makes sure that you don't get any tear out on the far side. But it looks like, because again we're drilling end grain, we didn't get any tear out anyway. I'm putting a piece of heat shrink tubing on all of the magnet wire that comes out the bottom, just to give it a little bit more durability and make sure that nothing breaks. It seems pretty good. I'm not taking the flame all the way to the end here, because obviously I don't want to burn off any of the insulation on the magnet wire itself. So this is the final item. Well, I hope you enjoyed this project video. In the next video, I will be returning to making a project for the bus. See you then!